Tell me. Mara, Dante Moretti said, his voice cutting through the ballroom like a blade dragged across crystal. Did you wear that dress for him? Or were you hoping I'd finally notice what you've been selling? The music died before the orchestra stopped playing. Onebiwan. Conversations collapsed into silence inside the gilded ballroom of the Alder Hotel, where Chicago's richest families, crooked judges, old money widows, and men with blood on their cufflinks had gathered beneath chandeliers the size of small cars. Mara Ellis stood at the center of it all in a black velvet dress that had belonged to her dead mother. One hand pressed against the strange black pearl button near her heart. Across from her, Dante's gray eyes burned with jealousy and accusation. Behind him, Vivienne Cross smiled softly, as if she had not spent the entire evening turning Mara into a joke. And beside Mara, Caleb Shaw, heir to a rival family, and still held the hand he had just kissed. 3 hours earlier, Mara had not been wearing the dress. She had been standing behind the guest registration table in a plain white blouse, checking names off a security list with the quiet precision that had kept Dante Moretti alive for the past 2 years. Officially, she was his executive secretary at Moretti Logistics, the woman who controlled his calendar, screened his calls, tracked his contracts, and corrected the mistakes made by men who earned 5 times her salary. Unofficially, she was the invisible wall between Dante and disaster. She knew which elevators he should avoid, which charity donors had gambling debts, which smiling councilman carried a recorder in his pocket. But tonight, Vivienne Cross had looked Mara up and down and said, "The servers are short-staffed. You don't mind helping. How do you? It's not like anyone will mistake you for a guest." A few women near the champagne tower laughed into their glasses. Mara swallowed the humiliation and kept checking names. Vivienne had been introduced to Chicago society as Dante's future wife, long before Dante had agreed to anything aloud. She came from the Cross family, old money wrapped in perfume and poison, and she understood the rules of rooms like this better than anyone. Smile before you strike. Compliment before you cut. Bleed someone in public while making everyone believe they handed you the knife. She wore silver silk and diamonds, bright enough to look holy. And every time she passed Mara, she left behind a soft little wound. Careful with the guest list. "Sweetheart," she murmured once. "Men like Dante don't forgive women who reach above their station." Mara kept her face still, though her fingers tightened around the pen. She had learned long ago that crying only fed people who enjoyed watching women break. Still, when she saw the name Caleb Shaw printed near the bottom of the list, her stomach pulled tight. Caleb was not supposed to be here. No Shaw had ever entered a Moretti event without blood following close behind. Mara gathered the guest folder and moved toward Dante, who stood near the private donor entrance, surrounded by men with hard smiles and expensive watches. He looked untouchable in a black suit, his dark hair brushed back, his posture calm, in the way storms looked calm from far away. Before she could reach him, Vivienne stepped into her path with a glass of red wine and a smile too sweet to be accidental. "Where are you rushing off to?" she asked, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "Did you find another way to make yourself important?" Mara lowered her voice. "Caleb Shaw is on the list. Mr. Moretti needs to know." Vivienne's eyes flickered. Just once, but Mara saw it. Then the wineglass tipped. Red spilled across Mara's white blouse, down her chest, over the folder in her hands. Gasps rose, followed by a few cruel laughs. Vivienne touched her own lips in fake horror and said, "Oh, Mud, I'm so sorry." That blouse was already struggling. Now, it's ruined. The worst part was not the wine. It was Dante turning at the sound of laughter and seeing only the aftermath Vivienne wanted him to see. Mara drenched, clutching the guest list, surrounded by smirking women and men who pretended not to enjoy the scene. Vivienne immediately stepped close to him and said, she was upset about something. I tried to calm her down. Mara stared at Dante, waiting for him to ask her what happened. Waiting for the man whose life she organized, down to the minute to notice the panic beneath her shame. But his gaze dropped to the soaked folder in her hands, then to the red stain across her blouse, and something cold passed over his face. "Go clean yourself up," he said quietly, not harshly. That somehow made it worse. He did not defend her. He did not question Vivienne. He simply dismissed her, as if she were an inconvenience threatening the elegance of his evening. Mara walked away with the ballroom's laughter sticking to her skin like spilled wine. In the women's dressing room, Mara locked herself inside the last stall and pressed both hands over her mouth until she stopped shaking. The blouse was ruined. Her phone screen was cracked from where the folder had hit it, and the guest list was stained beyond use. She almost called a cab. She almost left Dante to his empire, his perfect Vivienne, and whatever trap Caleb Shaw's presence might mean, but inside the emergency garment bag she had brought only because her apartment pipes had burst that morning. There was the black velvet dress, her mother's dress. Mara had never worn it outside her bedroom. It was too elegant, too fitted, too alive, with memories she did not understand. Her mother had once told her, "When the world tries to make you small, wear the thing that reminds you whose daughter you are." Mara changed slowly, fingers trembling over the old seams, pausing at the black pearl button sewn near the neckline. It was heavier than the others, almost warm under her touch. When Mara stepped back into the ballroom, the first person to see her dropped a champagne flute. The sound cracked through the room, and then heads turned. The laughter that had followed her out did not return. The black velvet hugged every curve Vivienne had mocked, not hiding Mara's body, but honoring it, turning her from an overworked secretary into something old, dangerous, and impossible to ignore. The dress had a modest neckline, long sleeves, and a narrow waist. But somehow, it commanded the room more fiercely than any diamond gown there. Dante looked at her from across the ballroom and forgot the sentence he had been speaking. His hand tightened around his glass until Mara thought it might break. For one breath, his expression held no suspicion, no comment, only stunned hunger and something painfully close to regret. Then Caleb Shaw appeared beside her, dressed in midnight blue, his blonde hair too bright under Moretti chandeliers. He bowed slightly and murmured, "You look exactly like your mother did the night she saved my life." Mara's blood went cold. She turned toward him, but Caleb gently took her hand before she could step away. "Don't react," he said with a pleasant smile for the room. "The woman in silver has been watching your dress since you walked in. Whatever your mother left behind, they still haven't found it. Mara's fingers curled around his. I don't know what you're talking about, she whispered. Caleb lifted her hand and kissed her knuckles. A gesture elegant enough for society and intimate enough to start a war. From across the ballroom, Dante moved. The room sensed it before Mara did. Men straightened. Women stopped breathing. Vivienne's smile sharpened as Dante crossed the marble floor toward them. Each step controlled but charged with violence. Mara tried to pull her hand back, but Caleb held it one heartbeat longer and whispered, "He needs to stop trusting the woman beside him." Then he let go, just as Dante arrived. Dante did not look at Caleb first. He looked at Mara, and jealousy made a stranger out of him. His gaze moved over the dress, the curve of her waist, the black pearl button under her fingers, then dropped to the place where Caleb's mouth had touched her hand. "Sure," he said, voice low. Caleb smiled. "Moretti. Lovely event. Dangerous guest list." Vivienne reached Dante's side and slid her hand around his arm as if claiming property. "I tried to warn you," she said softly, but loud enough for the nearest guests. "Mara has been acting strangely all night. Meres hat hemmel. Don't you? Caleb is not here for what you think. I was coming to warn you before." "Before or after he kissed your hand?" Dante asked. The crowd leaned in, without moving. Mara saw the wound beneath his anger, but he turned it into a weapon before she could reach it. Then came the question that would split both their lives open in front of everyone. "Did you wear that dress for him?" Dante asked. "Or were you hoping I'd finally notice what you've been selling?" Mara felt the words land harder than Vivienne's whine. Selling. Not flirting. Not hiding. Selling. In one sentence, he had accused her of betrayal, of using her body, of offering secrets to his enemy while wearing her mother's last memory. A murmur rolled through the room. Vivienne lowered her eyes with perfect sadness. Caleb's smile vanished. Mara looked at Dante and saw not the boss she had protected, not the man she had loved in silence, but a judge passing sentence before hearing the truth. Her hand dropped from the black pearl button. "I wore this," she said, her voice shaking but clear, "because someone tried to make me leave covered in shame." Dante's jaw flexed, but he did not speak. "And now I know," Mara continued, "that the most dangerous thing in this room isn't your enemies. It's how easily you believe the woman standing beside you." For a moment, Dante looked struck. Then Vivienne's hand tightened on his sleeve. "She's deflecting," she whispered. "Ask her about the message." Dante's face closed again. He reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. With one touch, he turned the screen toward Mara. There, beneath her contact name, was a message she had never sent. Route confirmed. He'll leave through the river entrance at 10. Payment after. Caleb Shaw's number sat above it, like a death sentence. Mara stared until the letters blurred. "That isn't mine," she said. "I never sent that." But the damage was already spreading through the room. Men reached for their phones. Women whispered behind jeweled hands. Vivienne looked wounded on Dante's behalf. Caleb stepped forward, but 2 Moretti guards blocked him. Dante's voice went quiet, almost empty. "Mara Elise. Effective immediately. Your access to Moretti systems is revoked. You will surrender your phone, badge, and company keys before you leave this building." Mara did not cry. Not there. Not for them. She removed the access badge from her wrist and placed it on the marble-topped donor table with a soft click that somehow sounded louder than the orchestra beginning again. Then she took the company keys from her clutch and set them beside it. Her phone she kept, closing her fingers around it until her knuckles paled. "You can take my job," she said to Dante. "You can take my name and drag it through this room if that helps you sleep beside a lie. But you don't get to take the only thing my mother left me." Dante's eyes flicked to the black dress, then to the pearl button. Behind him, Lorenzo Moretti had just entered the ballroom, and when he saw Mara, all the color drained from his face. Mara noticed. So did Dante. For one brief second, suspicion shifted direction, but Vivienne moved first, stepping forward with a trembling hand and saying, "Don't. Look at her. Even now, she's performing, and just like that." The room chose its story. Mara walked out through the side corridor alone, passing mirrors that reflected a woman she barely recognized. The dress swayed around her knees like a shadow with a memory. Behind the ballroom doors, the music grew louder, swallowing her disgrace. But beneath it, she heard hurried footsteps. She turned, expecting security. Instead, Caleb Shaw stood at the end of the hall with one finger pressed to his lips. "You need to leave now," he said, not because of Dante, because Lorenzo saw the dress. Mara's throat tightened. "What does my dress have to do with him?" Caleb looked past her, toward the ballroom where Dante Moretti had just destroyed the only trust she had left. "Everything," he said. "Your mother died because of what was hidden in it." Before Mara could answer, the lights flickered once overhead, and somewhere behind them, a woman screamed. The scream came from the service corridor behind the ballroom, followed by the sharp crash of a metal tray striking marble. Mara turned toward the sound, but Caleb caught her wrist before she could move. "No," he said, his voice no longer polished for society. "That is how they pull you back in." Mara stared at him, heart pounding against the black pearl button near her chest. "Who are they?" she demanded. "Vivienne Lorenzo." Dante Caleb's expression tightened at Dante's name. Dante is dangerous because he thinks betrayal is always louder than loyalty. Lorenzo is dangerous because he knows loyalty can be buried before it speaks. Before Mara could ask what that meant, two Moretti guards appeared at the far end of the corridor. Caleb stepped in front of her, smiling again, as if they were only guests, escaping boring speeches. "Ms. Alice is leaving with me," he said. One guard reached inside his jacket. Caleb's smile vanished. "Touch here. And the Shaw family receives your hand in a box by sunrise." Mara pulled away from Caleb, not because she trusted the guards, but because she refused to be passed from one dangerous man's protection to another. "I'm not going anywhere until someone tells me why my mother's dress matters." The guard slowed, uncertain now, their eyes shifting toward the ballroom doors. Caleb lowered his voice. "Your mother, Elaine Ellis, worked under the name Elaine Voss for Moretti Logistics 17 years ago. She audited private routes no one was supposed to see. One night she came to my father's club with blood on her sleeve and a ledger under her coat. She said if anything happened to her, her daughter would need the truth more than she needed revenge." Mara's breath broke. Her mother had been a waitress, or that was what Mara had always believed. A tired woman with gentle hands, old bills, and a talent for smiling through fear. You're lying, Mara whispered. Caleb's eyes softened. I wish I were. She saved me from a car bomb meant for my father. 2 weeks later, she was dead. Before Mara could answer, the ballroom doors opened and Dante stepped into the corridor with Vivienne at his side and Lorenzo behind him. The air seemed to lose temperature. Dante's eyes went first to Caleb, standing near Mara, then to Caleb's hand, hovering protectively close to her back. Jealousy flashed again. But beneath it, something else moved suspicion. Perhaps, or the echo of her words. Lorenzo recovered faster than anyone. This is enough, he said, his voice heavy with authority. The girl has been caught with a shore. Wearing a dress meant to send a message. After a security breach that nearly cost us Dante's life. Search her. Mara stepped backward. Dante's jaw tightened. No one touch her. Vivienne looked up at him. Wounded, don't you? She refused to surrender her phone. What else is she hiding? Mara laughed once. Small and bitter. Funny how the woman who spilled wine on me is suddenly worried about evidence. Vivienne's face trembled beautifully. You keep blaming me because you cannot explain the message. Dante held out his hand. Give me the phone. Mara. The softness in his voice almost hurt more than his anger. It sounded like a man begging her not to prove him right. Mara looked at his hand and remembered every late night she had spent outside his office, bringing him black coffee he never asked for, but always drank. Every time she had rewritten a travel plan because something felt wrong. Every time he had said, "Good work, Ellis," without looking up, while she lived for the smallest warmth in his voice. You already decided what I am, she said. Why do you need my phone? Dante stepped closer. Because if you're innocent, it can prove it. No, Mara replied. If I'm innocent, you should have cared before the room started laughing. The words struck him hard enough that he stopped. Caleb murmured, Mara, we need to go. Lorenzo snapped. She is not leaving with a shawl. Dante's gaze cut to his uncle. Since when do you give orders over my people? For the first time that night, Lorenzo looked truly annoyed. Not afraid. Not exposed. But insulted that Dante had remembered he was the boss. Vivienne sensed the shift and moved quickly, placing herself between Dante and Mara, with tears shining in her eyes. I didn't want to say this in front of everyone, she said, but I saw Mara in your private office last week. After midnight, she told me she was updating your calendar. But when I came in, and she was standing near the emergency route files, Mara stared at her. You came in because you followed me. I followed you because I was worried about Dante, Vivienne said, her voice breaking at exactly the right moment. And tonight proved I was right. Lorenzo placed a hand on Dante's shoulder. A woman with access, or resentment, and a connection to Shaw is not a misunderstanding. It is a pattern. Mara realized then how carefully they had built the cage. Every late night, every locked file, every time she had done her job alone because no one else could be trusted, they had turned her loyalty into motive. Dante ordered his guards to escort Mara to a private room upstairs. Not the police. Not the basement rooms where Moretti traitors disappeared. But not freedom either, until I know the truth, he said. Mara looked at him as if he had already lost the right to use that word. Caleb protested, but 3 guards blocked him. Vivian watched with hidden satisfaction as Mara walked between the men, still wearing the black dress that had made an entire ballroom forget how to breathe. Upstairs, they placed her in a small conference suite overlooking the river. The city glittered beyond the glass. Indifferent and beautiful, a guard stood outside. Mara sat alone at the long table, phone clenched in her hand, replaying Caleb's words until they became unbearable. Ilainevus. Ledger. Blood on her sleeve. Garbum. Dead 2 weeks later. Her mother had never spoken of Mafia families, but Mara remembered one thing the night before the accident. Elaine had sewn the black pearl button tighter while crying quietly at the kitchen table. Mara unlocked her cracked phone and searched the hidden folder where she kept scans of old documents from her mother's storage box. Bills. Photo. Insurance letters. A recipe written in blue ink. Nothing useful. Then she remembered the small symbol Caleb mentioned. Her mother had drawn it once on the back of an envelope. A circle cut by 3 lines. Like a broken compass, Mara zoomed in on an old photograph of her mother wearing the black dress. There it was, barely visible, embroidered inside the cuff. The same symbol was etched faintly on the black pearl button near Mara's heart. Her hands began to shake. The door opened before she could hide the screen. Dante entered alone, without Vivian, without Lorenzo, without the armor of an audience. He looked more tired than cruel. "I found something," he said. "The root message came from your number, but it passed through an internal relay before it sent. Someone inside the company masked it." Mara stood slowly. "So now, I'm less guilty." Dante flinched. "Mara, don't say my name, like it cost you something." Dante took the blow without defending himself. "I was wrong to say what I said in the ballroom." Mara laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. "Which part? The dress? The selling? Or the part where you stripped my access in front of people who already wanted me on my knees?" He looked at the floor for half a second, and that tiny break in his control almost undid her. "Almost all of it," he said. "But Caleb Shaw is not safe." Mara stepped closer, anger finally warming her voice. "Neither are you. The difference is he warned me before someone screamed in the hallway. You waited until I was humiliated to wonder if maybe your perfect fiancé was lying." Dante's eyes darkened at Vivian's name. "She said she saw you near my emergency files. I was there because your river exit had been changed by someone else." Mara snapped. "I changed it back. That night, your car didn't explode." "Dante, that wasn't Vivian saving you. That was me." The silence after her words was brutal. Dante stared at her, as if the floor had opened beneath everything he believed. Mara saw the exact moment he remembered that night, 3 months ago, the rain. The sudden route change. The explosion, 2 blocks from the original exit. Vivian arriving afterward wrapped in a coat and tears, claiming she had warned security because she loved him too much to lose him. He had rewarded Vivian with trust, and Mara with more work. Dante's voice dropped. "Why didn't you tell me?" Mara's eyes filled. But she refused to let the tears fall. "I did. I sent you 3 reports. Your office marked them reviewed." Dante went still. "I never saw them." "Then, ask the woman who brings you coffee when I'm not allowed past your door anymore." They looked at each other, and for the first time that night, the real enemy stood between them without speaking. Then the fire alarm erupted through the room. Red lights flashing against the glass. Outside, the guard shouted once and fell silent. Dante moved instantly, drawing a gun from beneath his jacket and stepping in front of Mara. The instinctive protection hurt because it came too late and still felt real. Smoke began seeping under the door, thin and gray. "Stay behind me," he ordered. Mara grabbed his arm. "No. If this is Lorenzo. He wants the dress." Dante looked down at the black pearl button, then back at her. "Why?" "Because my mother hid something in it before she died." His face changed. Not disbelief. Recognition. "Elena Elise," he said quietly. Mara froze. "You know her name." Dante's answer was cut off by a crash at the door. Someone tried the handle, then slammed into it with force. Dante lifted the gun. Mara backed toward the window. One hand pressed to the button that suddenly felt heavier than jewelry, heavier than memory. Her phone buzzed once on the table. A message from an unknown number lit the cracked screen. "Don't trust Dante with the dress. His family killed Elaine." Then the door burst open. The door exploded inward with a force that cracked the frame, and two men in black masks rushed into the conference suite through the smoke. Dante fired once, not at the first man's chest, but at the sprinkler pipe above him. Water burst from the ceiling in a violent silver spray, turning the smoke into heavy fog and forcing the attackers to flinch. Mara dropped to the floor as the second man lunged toward her. Not Dant, not the phone, but the black dress. His gloved hand clawed for the pearl button near her heart, and the terror that shot through her was colder than the gunfire. Dante slammed him into the table, but the man still tore at Mara's neckline with desperate focus. The button. Madagaspit. Kicking backward. "They want the button." Dante's eyes cut to the black pearl for one sharp second, and something like dread crossed his face. The attacker spat blood onto the carpet and hissed. Lorenzo said, "Burn it if you can't take it." Then Dante struck him hard enough to silence him. The alarm wailed. Water poured over the conference table, soaking documents, chairs, Don't suis. Mara's hair, the velvet dress. Dante dragged one attacker's mask off, and his jaw tightened. "He's not sure," Mara said, reading the answer in his face before he spoke. Dante looked toward the door, where the second man lay groaning. "No. He works for my uncle." The words seemed to cost him more than the gunshot. For years, Dante had treated suspicion like oxygen, breathing it in every room, every deal, every conversation. Yet somehow Lorenzo Moretti had lived closest to him, wearing the face of family while moving knives under the table. Mara pushed herself up, clutching the torn neckline of her dress. "You knew my mother's name," she said, before the door opened. "You said Elaine Ellis, like she meant something." Dante did not answer immediately. He looked at the ruined room, the masked men, the water dripping from the chandelier, then at Mara's trembling hand over the black pearl. She was the first name in my father's locked files. Mara felt the world tilt. "Your father had files on my mother." Dante took one step toward her, then stopped, as if he no longer trusted himself to approach without permission. "After my father died, I inherited sealed records. I was 26, angry, and more interested in finding who betrayed him than understanding who tried to save him. Elaine's file was incomplete. Pages missing. Photos removed. One note remained. His voice lowered. It said she had evidence of internal betrayal, and that if she disappeared, someone inside the family had killed her. Mara's throat closed. For 17 years, she had lived with the story of a rain-slick road, failed brakes, and a police report no one questioned because poor women died quietly every day. "And you never looked for her daughter?" she asked. Dante's expression twisted with shame. "I didn't know she had one." Mara laughed once, broken and disbelieving. "You hired me. You ran background checks on everyone who entered your building. You knew my last name. Your file was altered." Dante said, "Your mother's maiden name was erased." The words should have comforted her. They did not. They only proved the lie had been larger than she could survive in one breath. Dante took the attackers' phones and handed Mara her own, cracked one from the table. The unknown message still glowed on the screen. "Don't trust Dante with the dress. His family killed Elaine." Mara turned it toward him. "Is it wrong?" Dante read it, and his face went dangerously still. "No," he said. "Not completely." The answer hurt because it was honest. "My family killed her." He continued, "But I don't believe my father ordered it. Lorenzo took control of several routes during the week. Elaine died. 3 days later, the ledger she was supposed to deliver vanished." Mara pressed her wet hair from her face. "Caleb said she saved his life." "Then Caleb knows more than he told you." Dante looked toward the corridor. "And Lorenzo knows the dress matters enough to attack you in my hotel during my event. While half of Chicago's underworld is downstairs, that means he is running out of time." They escaped through a staff elevator. Dante accessed with a code Mara had never seen, moving downward while the alarm screamed above them. For the first time since she had known him, Dante did not command the space around him. He guarded the door with his body, soaked and silent, glancing at Mara as if every bruise he could not see still belonged to him. Mara hated that some part of her wanted to lean into the protection. She hated more that another part still remembered the ballroom. His voice, the word selling, and the way everyone had looked at her after he said it. "Don't mistake this for trust," she said, without looking at him. Dante's hand tightened around the gun. "I won't. I mean it. You don't get to switch from judge to savior because the evidence finally embarrassed you." His eyes lowered. "I know." The elevator hummed between floors. Mara touched the pearl button again, and Dante noticed the habit. "Does it open?" he asked. "I don't know," she said. "My mother sewed it shut like she was afraid of it." The elevator opened into the hotel's underground service garage, where Caleb Shaw waited beside a black SUV with its lights off. Dante raised his gun. Caleb raised both hands. "Bored and calm. Before you shoot me, Moretti, consider that I am the only reason your secretary is not currently being dragged into Lorenzo's trunk." Dante's voice was lethal. "How did you know we'd come this way?" Caleb nodded toward Mara's phone. "I sent the message." Mara stepped between them before Dante could move. "You told me not to trust him." "I told you not to trust him with the dress." Caleb corrected. "There's a difference." Dante's eyes narrowed. "You know what is inside it." Caleb's smile faded. "I know what Elaine died protecting, not where she hid it. She never told my father. She only said her daughter would carry proof close to her heart one day. When the Morettis finally turned on themselves, Mara's fingers went numb against the pearl button, close to her heart. Her mother's words had not been poetry. They had been instructions. Caleb opened the SUV door. But Mara did not move. No more half-truths. She said, "From either of you." She looked first at Caleb. What did my mother save you from? Caleb's expression changed. And for a moment, the dangerous air disappeared, leaving only the boy he must have been. A bomb under my father's car. I was 17. Drunk. Stupid. Angry. I stole the keys and tried to leave before a meeting ended. Elaine saw a man from the Moretti side switch envelopes with one of our drivers. She pulled me out of the car seconds before it exploded. My father blamed Dante's father. Elaine insisted it was someone trying to start a war between families. Dante went very still. Lorenzo. Caleb looked at him. That is what my father believed before he died. But belief is not proof. Mara felt the black pearl beneath her fingers like a heartbeat that did not belong to her. "And Vivienne?" she asked. Caleb's mouth hardened. "Vivienne Cross has been laundering money through charity foundations for Lorenzo for at least a year." The name hit Dante like a second betrayal. Mara saw it. And despite everything, she looked away to spare him the humiliation of being watched while his world collapsed. Caleb reached into his coat and removed a folded photocopy, protected in a plastic sleeve. Elaine gave my father one page from a ledger. He kept it hidden until the Cross family began moving money through the Moretti Foundation. Same shell company. Same routing pattern. Different decade. Dante took the page, but handed it to Mara without reading, as if admitting she had the greater right. The gesture unsettled her. On the paper were names, numbers, dates, and one symbol stamped faintly in the corner, the broken compass. Mara's breath caught. "I found this symbol in my mother's things." Dante looked at the button, and on the dress. Caleb nodded. It was used by a private auditing network. People hired to trace dirty money no court could reach. Elaine was not a waitress. She was one of their best. Mara closed her eyes, and grief turned into something sharper. Her mother had not been weak. She had been hunted. They drove to a closed tailor shop on Taylor Street, owned by an elderly woman named Rosa Bellini, who opened the back door before Caleb knocked twice. Rosa took one look at Mara in the soaked black dress and covered her mouth with both hands. "Elaine's girl," she whispered. Mara froze. "You knew my mother," Rosa nodded, tears gathering in her lined eyes. "I altered that dress for her the week she died. She said if a young woman ever came wearing it with fear in her eyes. I was to check the pearl, not the hem." Dante stood near the door, silent and grim, while Caleb watched the street through the blinds. Rosa led Mara behind a curtain into the fitting room, where yellow light softened the cracked mirror. "She loved you more than breath," Rosa said. "She made me promise not to look inside, only to tell you this: the truth would hurt. But it would not kill you unless you handed it to the wrong man." Mara's eyes met Dante's reflection in the mirror. He did not defend himself. He only looked away. Rosa brought out a small velvet tray and tools thin enough for jewelry work. Mara stood very still, while the old woman examined the black pearl button. "It is not sewn shut," Rosa murmured. "It is locked." She pressed the broken compass symbol with a needle point, turned the pearl half an inch, then stopped when a faint click sounded beneath her fingers. Mara grabbed the edge of the table. Dante stepped forward, but halted when she lifted one hand. "Let her finish," Mara said. Rosa unscrewed the pearl face slowly, revealing a tiny metal capsule sealed inside the button. It was no bigger than a fingernail, dull with age. But every person in the room understood at once that men had died, leet, and built empires over something this small. Caleb exhaled. Dante whispered, "Iline." Mara reached for the capsule, but Rosa caught her wrist gently. "There is one more thing." From inside the button casing, she removed a strip of paper folded so tightly it looked like thread. On it, in faded blue ink, were 4 words: "Trust the one who kneels." No one spoke. Caleb looked confused. Dante looked as if the words had struck some memory buried deeper than pride. Mara stared at the note until the letters blurred. "My mother wrote this," Rosa nodded. "She said you would understand when the right man stopped standing above you." Mara almost laughed at the cruelty of it. The only man who had knelt before her tonight had been Caleb, kissing her hand as a warning. The man she wanted to trust had stood in a ballroom and made her shame public. Dante seemed to know exactly where her thoughts had gone. "I don't deserve that note," he said quietly. Mara looked at him then, really looked, and saw not the Mafia boss, not the cold judge, but a man facing the first ruins of his own blindness. Before she could answer, Dante's phone buzzed. He checked the screen, and his face hardened. Vivian just called an emergency family council at the mansion. He said, "She is claiming Mara fled with Shaw after attacking my guards." Caleb swore under his breath. Rosa crossed herself. Mara took the tiny capsule from the tray and closed her fingers around it. Then she scared. Mara said. Dante looked at her. "She's escalating." "No," Mara replied. And for the first time that night, her voice did not tremble. "She's cornered." Dante's eyes flicked to her hand. "We need the data read before Lorenzo destroys whatever remains at the office." Caleb shook his head. "My people can decode it." Dante's gaze turned murderous. "Your people will not touch Elaine's evidence." The old fight rose between them, but Mara stepped into the center of it. Wet dress, torn, hair drying in uneven waves, our humiliation still fresh on her skin, and something new burning underneath. "Enough," she said. Both men stopped. "This belongs to my mother. This belongs to me. And if Vivian wants a council, she can have one." She looked at Dante, then at Caleb. "But this time, I decide who gets to speak, who gets to bleed, and who gets to beg." The Moretti mansion stood behind iron gates on a private stretch of Lakeshore Drive, its windows glowing like watchful eyes above the black water. By the time Mara arrived, the family council had already gathered in the old dining hall, a room built for weddings, funerals, and decisions no law would ever record. Men in tailored suits lined the walls. Their wives sat like judges in diamonds. Vivienne stood near the fireplace in silver silk, her face pale and wounded, one hand resting over her heart as if betrayal had physically bruised her. Lorenzo sat at the head of the table, not in Dante's chair, but close enough to suggest he had been waiting years to move into it. When Mara entered between Dante and Caleb, still wearing the torn black dress, whispers spread like spilled oil. Vivienne's eyes widened, then softened into performance. "Mara," she breathed. Thank God you're alive. We were terrified after you attacked those men and ran. Mara did not answer her. She walked to the center of the room and placed the tiny metal capsule on the long mahogany table. The sound was almost nothing, yet every head turned toward it. Dante stood slightly behind her. Not beside her. Not in front of her. For once, he let her occupy the center alone. Lorenzo's gaze dropped to the capsule, and the mask he wore cracked for less than a second. It was enough. Mara saw it. Dante saw it. Vivienne saw that Dante saw it. And panic moved under her perfect face, like something trapped beneath ice. Lorenzo recovered first. This is theater, he said. A disgraced secretary arrives with a sure air and a trinket from a dead woman. Expecting us to forget, she fled an active investigation. Caleb smiled coldly. Careful. Lorenzo. Dead women have a habit of speaking louder than cowards. Several men shifted at the insult. Dante's voice cut through them. Sit down. Caleb. Then, without taking his eyes off Lorenzo, he added, everyone else stays silent until Mara speaks. For one heartbeat. The room resisted. Mara felt it in the stiffness of the men along the walls, in the offended inhale of old women who had never been told to listen to someone like her. Then Dante removed his signet ring and placed it on the table beside the capsule. The room stilled. In Moretti tradition, the ring meant his authority was now attached to the matter in front of them. Anyone who interrupted would not be insulting Mara alone. They would be challenging Dante's command. Mara looked at the ring, then at him. He did not ask for gratitude. He did not soften the moment with an apology. He simply gave her the one thing he had denied her in the ballroom, the right to be heard before judgment. Mara turned back to the room. My name is Mara Ellis, she said. For 2 years, I ran Dante Moretti's calendar. Security movement, donor correspondence, and private logistics summaries. Tonight, I was accused of selling his route to Caleb Shaw. That accusation was built on a message I did not send. Vivienne gave a small, wounded laugh. Mara, please. We all saw the message. Mara looked at her. Yes, we saw the message. We did not see who made it. Dante nodded once toward a young technician standing near the far wall. The man connected a laptop to the room's screen with visibly shaking hands. Vivienne's lips parted. Don't you? What is this? He did not look at her. The part you hoped I would never check. The screen lit up with internal routing logs from Moretti Logistics. A line of data appeared. Mara's number. Caleb's number. Time stamp. Emergency route information. Then, another layer opened beneath it, showing the relay source. The room leaned in. The message had not been sent from Mara's phone directly. It had passed through an executive, administrative access point inside the Foundation office. The access key belonged to Vivienne Cross. Gasps rose around the table. Vivienne's face went white, then pink, then tearful. That is impossible, she whispered. Someone used my credentials. I would never hurt Dante. Mara had expected lies. She had not expected how calmly Vivienne could bleed innocence into every word. Lorenzo stood sharply. Credentials can be stolen. This proves nothing, except that someone is skilled at deception. Mara nodded. I agree. That surprised him enough to make him stop. One piece of evidence is never enough. She continued. That is why the person who framed me prepared several A cropped hallway video. A staged meeting with Caleb. Cash and passports waiting to be found in my apartment. Vivian's eyes flickered. You admit there were passports. I admit someone broke into my apartment before Moretti men arrived. Mara turned toward Dante's technician. Show the server's hallway footage from the older hotel. The screen changed. There was Mara, soaked in wine, walking away from the ballroom. Then Vivian entering the same hallway minutes later, speaking to the head of hotel security. The audio was faint, but clear enough. Vivian's voice said, "Cut the cameras near conference suite 12 for 20 minutes. If anyone asks, say the alarm damaged the system. You'll receive the rest after she is gone." The dining hall erupted. Vivian stepped backward as if the video had shoved her. "No," she said. "That's edited. Don't you? You know me." Dante looked at her then, and whatever she saw in his face made her voice falter. Mara watched him, not with satisfaction, but with a strange ache. This was the moment he should have reached in the ballroom. Before the wine, before the accusation, before he let another woman's tears outweigh Mara's years of loyalty. He had arrived too late. But at least he had arrived. Lorenzo slammed his palm on the table. Enough. Even if Vivian panicked, it does not explain this Shaw's involvement. It does not explain Elaine Ellis, or why her daughter has carried stolen property into a family council. Mara picked up the metal capsule. "You just said my mother's name." Lorenzo froze. Dante mentioned her. "No," Mara said softly. Dante never said Elaine's full name in this room. Silence fell so hard it felt physical. Lorenzo's eyes sharpened. And in that instant, the room saw what Mara had seen, fear hiding behind contempt. Dante's technician carefully connected the old data capsule through a reader Rosa had provided. The screen flickered, failed once, then opened into a directory of damaged files. Mara's mother had organized everything, with painful care-routing ledgers. Shell companies, charity, transfers, photographs of meetings, scanned signatures, audio fragments. One folder was labeled, "If they kill me." Mara's hands curled at her sides. Dante made a small movement as if to touch her shoulder, then stopped himself. She was grateful and furious at the same time. The technician opened the folder. Elaine Ellis appeared on the screen in a grainy video. Younger than Mara remembered. Sitting in a car at night with rain on the windshield. Her face was pale, but steady. "My name is Elaine Ellis," she said through static. "If this is being watched, Lorenzo Moretti has moved against me, and he will try to blame the Shaws or Dante's father before the truth can reach the council." Mara stopped breathing. Across the room, Lorenzo's chair scraped back. No one let him leave. Two older Moretti men stepped into his path, not touching him yet, but close enough to promise they would. The video continued. Elaine described the laundering network. The false routes. The bomb meant to provoke war with the Shaw family. And the way Lorenzo used charity foundations to clean money while pretending loyalty to his brother. Then came an audio file. Lorenzo's voice, younger but unmistakable, filled the dining hall, make the accountant disappear. If she kept a copy, find the dress. She sews things into clothes like a sentimental fool. Mara's knees nearly weakened, but she locked them. Vivienne covered her mouth. Lorenzo stopped pretending. That woman was a thief. Hisnala. She stole from this family. Dante stepped forward at last. She tried to save it. Lorenzo turned on him. You think you're different from your father because you wear guilt like a crown. You were a boy when men made this empire survive. Elaine was collateral. The word shattered something in Mara. Collateral. Her mother's life, reduced to an accounting expense. Vivienne chose that moment to save herself, and destroyed herself instead. Lorenzo told me she was just a secretary. She cried, pointing at Mara. He said the dress had old files. Nothing more. He said if I helped remove Mara, Dante would be protected, and my family's debts would be erased. I did it for us. Don't you? I did it because I loved you. The room turned on her with a disgust so complete, even she seemed to feel it. Mara looked at Dante. He looked back, and his face carried the full weight of every time he had believed Vivienne over silence, elegance over truth, a perfect tear over Mara's shaking hands. You did it for money, Mara said. Vivienne spun toward her. You don't know anything about my life. Mara nodded to the technician. A final audio clip played, captured in the hallway before the cameras were cut. Vivienne's voice rang out. I don't need Dante to love me. I need the Moretti name before my father's creditors tear us apart. Once I'm his wife, that curvy little secretary disappears. This time no one gasped. The room had passed beyond shock into reckoning. Vivienne's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Lorenzo looked at her with pure hatred. Not because she had betrayed him, but because she had failed cleanly. Dante walked to the head of the table, where Lorenzo had been sitting, and finally took his chair. Lorenzo Moretti, he said, voice low. By order of this council, and by the blood you spilled inside this family, you are stripped of name, authority, account access, a route commande, and protection. Lorenzo laughed. But there was fear in it now. You need me. Dante's eyes were empty. No, I needed the truth. And you killed the woman who carried it. He turned to Vivienne. Vivienne Cross. Our alliance is void. Your family's accounts will be audited by morning. Every charity transfer, every shell company, every debt. Vivienne whispered his name once. But Dante did not answer her. He looked at Mara instead. This council owes Elaine Ellis a public record, and Mara Ellis an apology. The apology did not come as one voice. It came in fragments, uglier and more honest than polished regret. An old capo lowered his head and admitted he had signed Elaine's termination order after being told she stole. A foundation board member confessed. Vivienne had asked her to misplace Mara's access reports. Dante's own security chief stepped forward, shame burning his face, and admitted he had ignored Mara's warnings because Vivienne said Mara was obsessed with Dante. Mara listened to all of it without crying. Each confession returned a piece of her life, but none could return the woman who had sown courage into a black pearl. At last, Dante rose and walked toward Mara. The room watched, expecting him to reclaim command, perhaps to embrace her, perhaps to turn pain into romance, because men like Dante often believed apologies could be dramatic enough to become forgiveness. Instead, he stopped several feet away. Then Dante Moretti, who had never knelt to anyone in that house, lowered himself to one knee before Mara Ellis and bowed his head. I judged you in public, he said, So I will beg your forgiveness in public, but I know I have not earned it yet." Mara stared down at him, and the note inside the button burned through her memory. Trust the one who kneels. For a terrifying moment, she wanted to believe her mother had meant this. Then she remembered the ballroom, the laughter, the word selling, and the lonely walk out of a room where Dante could have saved her with one question, but chose accusation instead. "Get up," she said quietly. Dante lifted his eyes. "Mara, get up," she repeated. Not cruelly, but firmly. "My mother's last message is not a shortcut to my forgiveness." He rose slowly, accepting the wound because he had made it. Mara picked up the black pearl casing and the capsule, then faced the council. Elaine Ellis will not be remembered as collateral, a thief, or a dead accountant. She will be named as the woman who exposed a traitor before any of you had the courage to see him. Her gaze moved to Vivienne, then Lorenzo. "And I am not disappearing." By sunrise, the Moretti mansion no longer looked like a palace. It looked like a crime scene that had finally grown tired of pretending. Men who had once kissed Lorenzo's hand now stood at a careful distance, while Dante's loyal guards removed his ring, his phone, his weapons, and the quiet little privileges that had made him untouchable for 17 years. Lorenzo did not shout when they took him through the East Hall. He smiled at Mara instead. An ugly, intimate smile meant to frighten her one last time. "You think truth makes you safe?" he asked. "Truth only changes who wants you dead." Mara looked at the man who had reduced her mother to collateral and felt, to her own surprise, no fear. The black dress was torn, soaked, and stained from the night, but she stood straighter in it than any woman in diamonds. "Maybe," she said, "but lies are what made you powerful, and now everyone has heard you tell the truth." Vivienne Cross broke differently. Lorenzo left like a cornered wolf, still baring teeth. Vivienne collapsed, like glass dropped from a great height. The moment Dante voided the alliance, calls began spreading through the private rooms and chauffeured cars outside the mansion. Her father's creditors heard first, then the foundation board, then the lawyers who had protected the Cross name for years because they believed a Moretti marriage was coming. By breakfast, Vivienne sat alone in the same dining hall where she had performed Heartbreak only hours earlier. Her silver gown wrinkled, her mascara smudged, her hands shaking around a glass of water she never drank. When Mara entered to retrieve the lost copy of Elaine's files, Vivienne looked up with hatred so exhausted it almost resembled grief. "Are you satisfied?" she whispered. "You got him to look at you. You got them all to pity you. Is that what you wanted?" Mara paused at the table. "No. I wanted to do my job without being turned into a target, because you were afraid of a woman you thought was beneath you." Vivienne laughed, sharp and wet. "Beneath me? You have no idea what it is like to be born into a family where love is counted in debt and usefulness. My father sold pieces of me before I was old enough to understand contracts. Dante was my exit." Mara looked at her for a long moment, and some quiet, wounded part of her understood more than she wanted to. But understanding was not forgiveness. "Then you should have burned the cage," Mara said, not dragged another woman into it, and locked the door from the outside. Vivienne's face twisted. "You think he loves you. Men like Dante love guilt when it has a pretty enough face. He will worship you until you stop being evidence of his redemption." Mara felt the words hit a place already bruised. She leaned closer. Calm now. Maybe. But the difference between us is I am not building my life around whether Dante Moretti chooses me. She took Elaine's files from the table and left Vivienne with nothing but the echo of all the rooms she had tried to own. Dante found Mara in the East Garden, where winter roses bent under morning frost and Lake Michigan glowed pale beyond the walls. He did not approach too closely. That small restraint said more than any apology he had offered the night before. He had changed clothes, but exhaustion still clung to him, dark beneath his eyes, heavy in his shoulders, in his hand. He carried a folder sealed with the Moretti crest. The council signed it. He said, Elaine Ellis will be entered into the family record as a protected auditor who exposed internal treason. Her name will be cleared in every file we control. The false theft report is gone. Mara looked at the folder but did not take it immediately. And the police report Dante exhaled. Our lawyers are reopening the case. Publicly. No quiet settlement. No sealed apology. That mattered. It mattered so much. Her throat tightened. Still, she said, that is for my mother. What about me? Dante lowered his eyes, then held out a second document. Your termination has been erased, but I'm not asking you to come back as my secretary. Mara accepted the second document and read the first line twice before trusting it. Independent Oversight Authority for Moretti Logistics and Foundation accounts. Beneath it were clauses giving her direct access to all financial routes, protection from family interference, power to suspend transactions, and the right to report illegal activity to outside counsel without Dante's permission. Her signature line stood beside his. This gives me more power than half your counsel. She said, yes. They agreed to this, some objected. Dante's mouth tightened. I reminded them that the last woman they refused to hear ended up dead. And her daughter brought the empire to its knees with one button. Mara almost smiled. But the feeling faded quickly. Power is not an apology. No, Dante said. It is a boundary with teeth. You should have had one from the beginning. Mara looked toward the lake. The old version of her would have trembled at being offered authority by a man like Dante. The woman standing there now understood that authority given could also be taken, unless she made it hers. She turned back to him. I have conditions. Dante did not hesitate. Name them. Mara folded the document against her chest. Careful not to touch the black pearl button Rosa had repaired before dawn. First, my department answers to an external legal board, not your family. Second, every employee who helped Vivienne frame me is removed from my chain of command. Third, my mother's case stays open until Lorenzo is charged in a court. People outside your dining room can see. Dante nodded after each condition. Done. Mara studied his face. Fourth, you never again punish me for evidence. You have not let me answer. Pain moved through his eyes. Maranu, you asked me once if I wore that dress so you would notice what I was selling. So hear me clearly now. If you ever humiliate me to protect your pride again, I will not wait for your guilt to catch up. I will walk out, and you will spend the rest of your life knowing I survived you. Dante absorbed the words like a sentence he deserved. Then I will spend every day making sure you never have to. The first real public reckoning came 2 weeks later, not in a mansion hidden behind gates, but inside the grand ballroom of the older hotel. The very room where Mara had been turned into a spectacle. Dante insisted the Moretti Foundation hold its emergency donor assembly there because shame, he said, should be returned to the address where it was delivered. Mara almost refused to attend. Then Rosa brought the restored black dress to her apartment, cleaned, strengthened, and altered with a new inner seam that protected the pearl casing without hiding it. Your mother wore it when she chose truth. Rosa told her, you should wear it when they learn what truth costs. Mara arrived alone. Nudunch at her side. No, Caleb at her elbow. No man placed between her and the eyes that once laughed. The room fell silent when she entered. This time, the silence did not feel like judgment. It felt like people realizing too late that the woman they dismissed had been holding the floor beneath them. Dante was already on stage when Mara walked in, but he stopped speaking until she reached the front row. Everyone saw it. Everyone understood it. He would not continue without her permission. Mara gave one small nod, and only then did he turn back to the donors. Board members, journalists, and family allies seated beneath the chandeliers. 2 weeks ago, Dante said, voice steady but stripped of arrogance, I allowed this room to witness a lie. Worse, I helped sharpen it. Mara Ellis was accused of betrayal while the real traitors stood protected by money, family, and my own blindness. A ripple moved through the audience. Dante looked at Mara, then away, not asking her to soften the truth for him. Tonight, the Moretti Foundation releases all relevant audit findings to Federal Council. The Cross Alliance is terminated. Lorenzo Moretti has been removed from every business interest under my control. Elaine Ellis will be honored as the auditor whose evidence saved this organization from men who mistook silence for loyalty. Mara felt her mother's name move through the room, like a candle being carried through darkness. Then Dante stepped away from the podium. The audience expected him to introduce a lawyer, perhaps an elder, perhaps someone with a last name heavy enough to make the scandal respectable. Instead, he said, the new oversight director will speak for herself. Mara walked onto the stage, with her hands calm at her sides. The chandelier light struck the black pearl button, and for one dizzy second, she remembered being a little girl under a kitchen table, watching her mother sew by the yellow stove, humming softly while fear lived in the corners of their home. Mara touched the button once, not for courage, but in gratitude. My mother was not collateral, she said into the microphone. She was not a thief, not a footnote, not a woman who disappeared because powerful men decided her life was inconvenient. She was Elaine Ellis. She followed dirty money through clean rooms. She wrote down what dangerous people believed no one would dare record. And she left me proof. But more than that, she left me a choice. Mara looked out at the faces that had laughed 2 weeks earlier. I choose not to disappear. The applause began slowly, almost ashamed of itself, then grew until the chandeliers seemed to tremble. Mara did not smile for them. She did not need their approval to make the moment real. Near the side aisle, Vivian appeared under guard for less than a minute, brought by attorneys to sign an emergency statement admitting the foundation transfers had been falsified under Lorenzo's direction. Her beauty looked smaller now, not because she had lost it, but because it no longer protected her. She caught Mara's eye once. There was no apology in her expression, only the bitterness of someone who still believed losing was the same as being wronged. Mara let her pass without a word. That was its own victory. Behind the last row, Caleb Shaw leaned against a pillar and gave Mara a faint salute before leaving quietly. He had kept his promise to Elaine's memory. He had not tried to claim the daughter she left behind. For that, Mara was grateful. Months passed before Mara allowed Dante to walk her home. Not drive her. Not escort her with guards. Walk. It was late spring by then, and Chicago had softened around the edges. Trees blooming along the sidewalks, as if the city had never known winter. Moretti logistics had changed under Mara's oversight. Accounts once hidden behind family privilege now passed through external review. Men who had called her Dante's secretary learned to say Director Ellis, or say nothing at all. Lorenzo's trial had begun with sealed documents opened, and old witnesses finally willing to speak. Vivian's family had lost the foundation. The creditors had taken their estate, and every society column that once praised her elegance now used words like conspiracy and fraud. Dante never asked Mara for forgiveness again. He sent updates on her mother's case. He followed every boundary. He stood at the edge of her life, like a man learning that love was not possession, not protection, not jealousy, but patience with no guaranteed reward. On the anniversary of Elaine's restored record, the Moretti Foundation held a smaller gala. This time, under Mara's rules. No secret donor rooms. No hidden transfers. No guest list. She had not approved herself. Mara arrived in the black dress again. The pearl button had been reset over her heart. No longer a hiding place for evidence, but a memorial. When Dante saw her, he did not cross the room like a storm. He waited until she noticed him. Then he approached slowly, stopping at a respectful distance. "You look beautiful," he said. Mara lifted one eyebrow. "That sounds safer than your last question about this dress." The pain that crossed his face was old, but he did not look away from it. "My last question about that dress was the worst thing I ever said to someone who had only ever protected me." He took a breath. "I have a new one, if you will allow it." Mara studied him, feeling the room around them fade into a quiet hum. "Ask." Dante did not kneel this time. That surprised her, and somehow pleased her. He had learned not to turn her mother's message into theater. He stood before her as a man, not a boss, not a judge, not a king, expecting mercy from the woman he had wounded. "For once," he said, voice low enough that only she could hear. "May I be the man worthy of standing beside you?" Mara looked at him for a long time. She thought of the ballroom, the wine, the accusation, the way truth had crawled out of a button because her mother had refused to let evil have the final word. She thought of the months Dante had spent, proving change without demanding applause for it. Then she placed her hand lightly on his arm. Not surrender. Not forgiveness completed. Not the ending of pain. A beginning. Chosen freely. "Beside me," Mara said. "Not in front of me." Dante bowed his head once. Never again. And this time, when the room turned to look at Mara Ellis in that dress, no one saw a secretary trying to be noticed. They saw the woman who had survived shame, carried the truth, and changed all their lives.